Hello, welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable. Tonight we are looking at a topic about Jubilee years, the Jubilee cycles, and how these are going to be maybe fulfilled in the end times. Now, again, we don't promise to have all the answers, but we do have some fun questions, and we're going to take some time and look at these. So, if you guys have questions, make sure to put those in the chat. I also want to let you know that we are going to Israel in April of 2024. You're invited to come with us, so please do join us for that. And if you like this ministry, consider going over to patreon.com/Doug Hamp, and you can give as little as you want, $2, $5, $10 a month, or give as much as you want, of course. But thank you. That does help to keep the lights on and all that great stuff. So without further ado, I'm excited because, of course, we have Scott with us, but we also have Mark Svoboda, who is going to share with us some pretty cool stuff about Jubilee cycles, etc. So, Mark, welcome. We're glad you're here. And we're hoping that you'd give us just give us an intro. And of course, I can bring up your PowerPoint slides whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, this is a combination of, I guess, of prayer and other things and my interest in the end times, basically. And it started, I guess, around 96 when there was a prophecy guy that said that the 93 accord that Clinton signed with um, Israel was in the Palestinian Authority was the agreement, and that in the March of 97 then would have been the 3.5 year point, and that's when the Antichrist and all that was going to happen. So I got deep into study then and asked the question and got revealed a bunch of different things. One of the main things was 1 Corinthians 15, 50 through 52 about the last trumpet, and in Revelations, the seventh trumpet. And to me, I was revealed that that's the same trumpet. And I think it's also mimicked in the Battle of Jericho. And I think that's where Paul got all his ideas from on 1 Corinthians 15, 50 through 52 and 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 18. Because there's a shout and a trumpet. It's the last trumpet in the Battle of Jericho. In Corinthians, he just says trumpet. He specifically says what last trumpet before the walls come down at the Jericho and Jericho is sacked and burned to the ground. So from that standpoint, that led to me doing a bunch of different studies and so forth. And then in the early 2000s, I got involved with a group from a church, and we did a study of the Feast of the Lord. And also during that time frame, we had a study by our pastor John Anderson, who got me really inquisitive about the two-goat offering in Leviticus 16. And that really his answer wasn't that great, and I really have searched as to why is there the two-goat offering. And that's another discussion all on its own. But the main point was that as I was developing this systems and looking at different Bible teachers and everything, there's always the 490 years. And I did charts and everything's like everybody else on the midpoint, and everything just never worked out. So while I was in this Feast of the Lord, I said, what if the 50th year is a Sabbath year? And I asked that question. And so that got me down that path of making this chart, and we'll see it in the presentation here shortly. And if you want to go ahead and pull that up, that's really what got me down the path of my present understanding.
And real quick, myself and Sam Fulcher, who's been a guest on, we had a spirited discussion last night on that same issue, whether he's of the belief, Mark, that that the first year, that is a 49-year cycle, and yes, year 50 is a Jubilee year, but it's also the first year of the next cycle. And I'm like, we differ, and I'll put it that way. We'll have Sam on in the future to talk about that. He's at his grandson's birthday party tonight, so go ahead.
All right. So what I looked at is, I said, well, what if that's the case? And I went through a number of iterations on that chart. I think I did about 3 or 4. I don't remember exactly. And then when I finally got to 50 per line, and the bottom line is the 50th year, and numbered it individually is when it hit me. And I think the Holy Spirit fed me a whole bunch of different information, because usually when you get a download from the Holy Spirit, it's just not more than that question. There's a lot more that follows and goes with it. So if you bring up the presentation, we can go ahead and start on that. Mine is totally a 50-year count, and we'll talk about a little bit about why I don't think the 50th and the first year can be the same. And
Amen.
That's in the Leviticus 25. Well, I've got the verses up there. But this is the basis of my understanding. It was that the Sabbath year, there's neither sowing or pruning of your vineyard. If you read about the 50th year, there's no sowing, so that's the same. And you can neither reap nor gather the undressed vines. Well, undressed vines means you didn't prune your vineyard. So that basically means that a Jubilee is the same as a Sabbath year from that standpoint. But actually, it's actually supposed to be counted holy and things of that nature. So when I said it's the 50th year, so let's count it, and that's where we went. So also, I believe the count of the Jubilees is the same count as the Feast of Weeks or Shavuot or Pentecost. All right. So, and I looked at that, and from that, when I was developing the chart, and we'll see that later, my belief is that the 7 weeks and 62 weeks in Daniel is actually 7 Jubilees and 62 Sabbath years. And that the missing week is actually the 8th missing Jubilee, as I'll call it. In fact, I was going to write a book called The 8th Missing Jubilee. Never got around to it for a number of reasons. The main was I never could get authority to use different people's books for reference. And then the other recognition is that the fabled year of the Lord, the day of vengeance in Isaiah 61, is the Luke 4:16-21, which I have as the 80th Jubilee. And yes, it is a Jubilee. We'll go into that a little bit further on. And also, I believe the Battle of Jericho, I was listening to one of the speakers, I think Tom Van Asperen, if I remember his name correctly, with the Prophecy Club, I think, back in the late 90s. He kind of broached that subject to me, and I picked it up because, man, I just hooked on there. And like I said earlier, I think Paul picked up his trumpets and shout and all that from the Battle of Jericho. That's where he got that learning from. Then, of course, we have the 7 days of creation, or the 6,000 year theory, or the Jesus comes up on the 4th day because the sun and the moon and the stars were created on that day, or the 4,000th year. And also the ages of Moses as a type of Jubilee, 40, 80, 120. Well, 80 is the 4,000 if you do 80 times 50. And then 120 is the times 50 is the 6,000, which we're approaching quickly. You can go next. Okay, and then this is the verses from Leviticus 25, and it says, "You shall hallow the 50th year, and you shall proclaim liberty." By the way, my last name means liberty. This is why I'm also attuned to the Jubilee. "Throughout the land to all its inhabitants, it shall be a Jubilee for you. You shall return every one of you to your property, and every one of you to," it should be family. I'm sorry, I mistyped that. "That the 50th year shall be a Jubilee for you. You shall now sow or reap the aftergrowth, or harvest the unpruned vines." Again, it's a Sabbath year, follows the same thing as what's in 25:4. But in the 7th year, there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your unpruned vine. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land. So in Leviticus 25:10, it says, Jubilee is the 50th year, and the Sabbath year as a rule for the Sabbath year is about not sowing or not reaping. You can go on. Feast of Weeks and Jubilee count. Okay. In Leviticus 23:15-16, and from the day after the Sabbath, from the day on which you bring the sheaf of the elevation offering, you shall count off 7 weeks. They shall be complete. You shall count until the day after the 7th Sabbath, 50 days. And that's Pentecost. Greek for 50 is Pentecost. Then you shall present an offering of new grain to the Lord. Leviticus 25:8. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives 49 years. So in the Shavuot, it's 49 days. In the Jubilee, it's 49 years. So it's again the 49, 49, and then a 50th day in Shavuot, and then a 50th year in the Jubilee sequence. And you shall hallow the 50th year, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants, which is the statement that's on the Liberty Bell. It shall be a jubilee for you. You shall return every one of you to your property, and every one of you to your family. That should be family. Next screen. Y'all there?
Yeah, we're here. I went to the next screen.
Okay. Then,
Do you see it?
yeah, I see it.
Okay.
That the 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow or reap the aftergrowth or harvest the unpruned vines. Again, and this is to show that the 50th year is distinct, because 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard and gather in the fruits thereof. If the first year and the 50th year are the same, you have a clash of the you shall nots or shalls. So you can't be the first year and the 50th year cannot be the same, because they haven't had the same sowing and reaping harvest time. So, and also I had the start of the year as in the Torah. All my timing is based upon the following matrix of the feast of the Lord. Exodus 12:1. Jehovah spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. And that's what is called a bib. So I got onto this thing, and here's this chart of Jubilee years. And so this is basically, you have a 50-year count instead of a 49. The 8 weeks of Jubilees and 62 weeks gives you the 70 weeks. We'll see that in the chart here shortly. And that the quote by Gabriel to Daniel about the 62 and 7. So 62 is 62 times 7, which is 434, plus 8 is 442 years. But Gabriel took out one of the weeks. And the question is whether it's the 434 or it's the 8. You'll see from the chart, it's one of the Jubilees. Again, why I call it the 8th missing Jubilee. So if you want to just, some of the reasons why I went down this journey is the 2 goat offering I mentioned earlier. And there it is. I know it's kind of hard to see, but each column is 50 in a row. And at the very bottom, 1. In the first column is 1. Then as you go to the second column, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I was feeling in this chart and I hadn't put the numbers down, and I put everything else. And then I put in number 7, and my eyes went directly to the 7 and 62. And I knew right away that Gabriel had pulled out one of the Jubilees. And all my revelation came from making this chart here. It's been down my path from this thing. So it's kind of hard to see on that thing. From previous chart, we can see that there are 8 Jubilees and 62 years to make 70 Sabbath years. And that's also immolated in 2 Chronicles 36:22 about the 70 years. And then in Daniel 9:25 is shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And from the chart, the missing week is the 8th Jubilee. And my understanding is that the 7 weeks should be Jubilees, and the 62 weeks are regular Sabbath years. Jubilee always starts on the 10th day of the 7th month. This implies that the 49th year is only 6 months and 9 days. And I think that fulfills Matthew 24:22, which is the shortening of days.
This is awesome stuff, Mark. Can kind of give us the basic summary here, because there's a lot of information to take in, and I'm just concerned that maybe some of our people are like, "Whoa, what's he like?" Like, kind of give us the big summary takeaway from this, and how would this help us understand the end times in a more precise manner?
Okay. Well, my understanding is that from the charts and everything and I had discussions with Dr. Jeffrey Seif in a class I was taking under him as to exactly when Nehemiah chapter 2, that agreement with Artaxerxes is. And we had several discussions because I would take him to the airport after he was given in the class. And so we had a lot of discussions on that, probably 3 or 4. And he pretty much said that 445 BC was the year of Abib 1. He didn't specifically say Abib 1. He said in the month of Abib, because the date is not really given. However, if you read plainly from Nehemiah, he's in the previous month and it transitions to the next. So I feel, and along with, I'm trying to think of the book, The Coming Prince by Sir Robert Anderson. He also says that was Abib 1, and I think there's other authors who agree with that statement from that standpoint. So when I saw that 7 weeks and everything, I knew right away that was 440 years, and that there was also the fell on the 6 months and 9 days, because we took out that Jubilee. And so from that standpoint, I knew that if I subtracted that 440 from the 445, I got 5 BC, and then the other 6 months and 9 days would put me right on the birth date of Jesus on the Day of Atonement in 5 BC. So that's what I assumed from Daniel 7 and 62 weeks, is that is the actual birth date of Jesus. And that date is, I've found, is September 10th, 5 BC. That also agrees with the statements by Josephus in his book, because we know from Luke, Herod was still alive when Jesus was born, assumed to be somewhere around 2 years or younger. The other thing about that was I found that date through NASA's eclipses of the moon. They have a book published from 2000 BC all the way to 3000 AD of every eclipse of the moon. Well, in 5 BC, there are 2 full moon eclipses, one right at the Feast of Tabernacles and the other at Passover unleavened bread. So that's exactly 6 months apart. So who was born 6 months before Jesus? John the Baptist. If I remember correctly, I think John the Baptist's birth date would then be March 18th, 5 BC, which is really kind of an interesting fallout from this. And because of the 2 full moons, I was able to get Jesus's birth date because the Yom Kippur is 5 days before that occurs, on the 10th of the month, whereas Feast of Tabernacles is on the 15th. So the 15th is at the full moon. And that gives you where and that's how I found the date of Jesus's birth. So from that, in the Gospels, I says, well, what year, in the recognition that Jesus declared a Jubilee from the reading of Isaiah and Nazareth. So in two of the basic reasons why he's a Jubilee is he's gathered to his hometown, so he's with his family. The other reason is that it's in the thing. I lost my train of thought on that, but there's another reason and I can't think of it right. Oh, it's a favorable year, because the Jubilee is a year. Actually, it's longer than that. It's the remainder of the 49th year plus the full following year is the way I understand it. So using the Gospels, John and Luke mainly, that he started at 30, if you do the calculation from 5 BC to his 30 years old, that gives you to 26 AD.
Okay.
In the fall. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you follow the Gospels of John and Luke, you can, there's a verse in John that's real small. It talks about where Jesus said that no prophet is recognized in his hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the same event as in Luke 4.
Okay.
All right. So if you follow the progression of Passovers and things, the way John keeps it, you can see from the wedding at Cana that he goes to a Passover, and then the next event will be this, and this is how I dated that year as 27 AD on his birthday.
That would have been after the 40 days in the wilderness when he came back.
Yes, that's correct.
And I too, and Maria, what's her name? Mariola Wald has an excellent teaching on that as well. That she believes, and I do too, that Yeshua had actually had the priesthood transferred to him, if you will, from John, who was probably the legitimate high priest, and he was declaring the Jubilee that year. Not necessarily saying it's 27 AD. I know I don't get into the weeds on particular years with ancient history, but it was sometime right around there, I believe, that there was a Jubilee year announced. What now in our interactions on this show? You've been a viewer, and through Facebook, I'm wiggly within a 4 or 5 years. You're pretty dogmatic. What makes you so certain? What research? What scriptures? What move? What astronomical data makes you certain?
Okay, there's a number of things. Two other things that make me certain are the moon calculations, and also the historical records that we do have from Josephus, and I've also couple other books from a couple other people. One in particular, Bert McGee wrote the Jubilee Hypothesis, and he got 27 AD also using Ezekiel 1 and 2, and saying that the 30 years that Ezekiel's saying there is not his age, but that's the 30th year of a Jubilee, which is probably a little bit different than what other people may think. But his calculation agrees with me of 27 AD. So it was another way of him calculating it. And it's kind of a little bit difficult on how exactly he did that calculation. And I don't have the book with me in front of me.
So then that would have started, I guess that would have been, so you're saying that basically it's really 49 and a half years then?
What?
Or does the full year, I mean, in other words, the Jubilee year starts on Yom Kippurim in the fall.
Correct.
But you're, under your calculations, what you're saying is you're using, and again, I agree that Abib is the first of the months, but it's kind of that Hebrew tension thought where it is Abib the first of the months, or is Yom Kippurim, Yom Teruah, the head of the year, the first of the year? And I've concluded, yes, it doesn't have to be either or. It's sort of a both and. So I guess what I'm asking is so year 49, we get to the end of the cycle. When does that cycle start? At Yom Teruah, Yom Kippurim, or on the one?
Yom Kippur. That's when it starts. All right.
So when would
those
it flip?
5.5 months, or 5 months and 21 days, actually,
Right,
are transferred over to the 50th year, plus the 12 months of the next year. So it's almost 18 months long.
Okay. Now I'm following you now. I wasn't really following the math then.
It's a year and a half basically long is the Jubilee.
So the other question I had, as far as have you, and I have not, is there any difference and Doug would know, or he could pull it up. Is there any difference in the first 7 weeks, what's translated as weeks in the Hebrew? Because from what I understand, that means sevens, correct, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, it is Shavua, which also means week, which is a 7, right? So it ends with Shavuim instead of Shavuot. So that's the main difference there. So it's rather irregular. It's like sevens, but yes, to answer your question.
And Mark, was it more the math working out without like I've read the Coming Prince. We have a dear friend who practically idolizes Sir Robert Anderson, but Anderson, I believe, cheated and fudged by saying that a year is only 360 days. He called it a prophetic year, and to arrive at his calculation, I believe that his calculation was right around Passover of either 31 or 32 AD.
I believe
because he shortened the year by 5.25 days every, for that 480-year period to make the math work, if you will. That's
correct. Well, for my system, the math, I don't have any problem with any math whatsoever. It all works out. And I have Jesus' ministry from 26 AD in the fall through Passover in 30 AD. And then from some other historical points, which one I know that you don't particularly care for the Talmud in particular.
No, that's a hostile, Mark, that's a hostile witness in this situation. A hostile witness is excellent evidence to prove a point. And you're talking about the 40 years where they had the 3 or 4 miracles happen,
that's correct.
Where the lights wouldn't stay lit, the door wouldn't stay shut, and the
lot wouldn't were always left hand.
Yeah. I call all commentary Talmud now. Christians give Talmud too. I mean, that's what Calvin and Luther, and that's what Doug Hamp's books are. It's just Christian. That's what our opinions are. It's just we're just being Talmuders right now.
It just means study. That's all it means. So
I know.
And so we know for sure, based on historical evidence, that 70 AD was the year of destruction of the temple. So if you take that 40 years, it's 30 AD. The moon calculations also show that for the week to set up the way the history records is 8 days from what we call Palm Sunday through Resurrection Sunday. That the only years that could have been done were in 28, 30, and 35. And so from that standpoint, again, moon calculations, history, and things of that nature set you up that this is how these are the years that it had to happen, in my opinion. That's kind of why I'm so dogmatic on it.
And again, Look, it's your dogmatism is within my wiggle room. I'll put it that way. Mine is more simple. It's been about 2,000 years, and I believe like you said, maybe off by a year. I believe what we have recorded history as the temple being destroyed in 70 AD could have been 69, could have been 68, could have been 61, 71, or 72. But again, I have not got into the astrological charts as much, and I gave up on trying to prove chronology about 15 years ago because I would read 10 different scholars and they would have 25 different opinions, and most of them be well thought out and well researched. So,
if you're trying to get timing from the Bible, you're going to be wrong no matter what, my opinion. What I shortcut that method, just saying that Jesus declared the Jubilee, and it was the 80th, based on Moses's, and also from the Genesis 4th day, or the 4,000 years. So
you believe the year 4,000 then was from the outset of the ministry?
No.
Okay.
The outset of the ministry would have been, bear with me a second, it would have been 3999.
Okay. So
because that's the 49th year.
Okay. So kind of like Michael Rood has a teaching that Yeshua only ministered for 70 weeks versus the standard 3.5 years that most people have come to that. I don't know, a conclusion. It's generally just taught as gospel truth. And they get that third Passover from that one verse, I think in John, which I tend to agree with Michael on that issue. It doesn't really make sense, but I don't have a problem with 3.5 year ministry, a 70-week ministry. How long do you believe his ministry was?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. So, and started in the spring or the fall?
On the fall at the wedding at Cana.
Okay. And the wedding, okay. Do you believe that was like a on Yom Teruah, perhaps?
I don't know. I've heard different things, but the main thing I always hear was that during the Feast of Tabernacles, where lots of weddings occurred during that week.
Okay. And I've got my, Doug, help me out here. The wedding at Cana, and John's not necessarily 100% chronological, I don't think. But no. Where does Luke does not even record the wedding at Cana, though, does he?
Only John does. And
what I like about the wedding at Cana is you read the chapters together, and the wedding is the seventh day. I mean, it's specific. You count the days, and there's day 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the chapter break, and then it says after 3 days there was a wedding at Cana. I believe that is a veiled prophecy, if you will, of this wedding on the seventh day, as we see back in Genesis 1 as well, with the 7 days of creation. You ever been down that, looking at all the types and shadows of the seventh day plan?
Not all of them, but I mean, when I read the Bible, numbers like that will pop out at me left and right. They
pop out.
Yeah.
What now, as far as so how did you distinguish or determine that the first 7 weeks, and was it just a math issue? In other words, the equation or the chart you put together?
Here's the chart. Here's slowly the chart. When I saw the difference, when I put those numbers, individual numberings for the Jubilees at the bottom, and I saw the 7 and the 62, I mean, I just got such a download. It was unbelievable. And I said 2 words I can't repeat.
Well, help me understand. So the 7, you're saying that the first 7 in that Daniel 70 weeks prophecy, the first 7 would be
7 weeks are 7 Jubilees.
So correct. That's 350?
350
7 times
what?
50.
No.
Okay.
It's basically 7 times 1.5 years.
Okay. So that's where you get 7 times. What does that equal out to? 10.5?
Don't even try and go there. You'll rack your brain out, because you got to do 5 months in there. Possibility it could be 6 months long because of a leap year month in one of those items. So just say it's 1 year, 5 months, and 21 days, because there's 30 days in the month of Tishri. Okay. So from that standpoint, basically all I have is the 7 and 62 weeks is a period of time. And that period of time is 440 years, 6 months, and 9 days.
And the end of that was Passover, when he was cut off.
The end of it has nothing to do with cut off.
Okay.
All that's telling you is this is when the Messiah is coming, and that refers to his birth. That's how I understand it.
Okay, so the birth, not his death.
Not his death. That is correct. That's how I understand it, because of the calculation of the removal of the one Jubilee. You have 7 Jubilees, and if you look at the chart, I don't know if you want to pull it up. It's kind of hard to see, but if you go into that chart, you will see that with 7 and 8, it's 442 years, and you can see it in the yellow there. That's the 62, and the 7 is there, and then the 8 is 442 years. But you got to take out one Jubilee, so you got to subtract 1 full year. Then you got to subtract out the 5 months and 21 days, which gets you to the Day of Atonement.
So the sort of okay. So what you're helping? It's not that I don't understand. It's obviously different.
It's not easy to understand. I guarantee. And I think the only reason I understand it is because I got that flood when I made this chart.
Okay. But so that would have been my Messiah coming. You're calculating the birth, which would have been sometime 3 BC?
No, I have 5 BC.
5 BC.
Correct. Okay. Day of Atonement, 5 BC.
Was there any astronomical? Were there any
5 days
signs at that time?
Yeah, full moon on the Feast of Tabernacles, 5 days later.
What about any stars?
Eclipse of the full moon.
Okay. Yeah,
we've got a few questions if we want to get to those, but
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's start with this one. Ray of light. Oops. There we go. Hey, all right. Does anyone have an opinion on Genesis 6:3 referring to Jubilee years 70 times 120? Do you have any thoughts on that, Mark?
I don't.
Actually, she writes. She says, "Sorry, 50 times 120." Okay.
50. Well, that's the 6,000 years.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be correct.
Okay.
Which is the same thing as if you translate the 6,000 years from the Genesis 1 through 6th day times 1,000. So 120 into 6,000 is 50.
Okay. Hawkeye says, what is the possibility the Jubilee starts in the 7th month of the 49th year and ends on the 7th of the 1st year?
I've got that question before, but the way the sowing and reaping and things of that nature is that I believe it's the 1 year, 5 months, and 21 days, or year and a half, basically. And it doesn't start like that because it's a full year.
Okay. All right. There's a comment from CF. He says that Ken Johnson has the date at around 5948. I guess that's creation date. Makes sense to me. I don't know if you want to comment on that, or I can go to the next question.
5948. I think I have it 73.
Okay. So 5973. Okay.
27 from there, I think. Or it might be 72. It may be 72.
All right. This is from Tim. Do you wait for the first new moon after the spring equinox? The month
of full
Aviv?
Moon is how I understand it.
Okay.
To start the month of Aviv or for the Passover?
Well, that's actually for the Passover.
Okay. So it would be like
Aviv can start before the equinox.
If the so you're a barley guy?
Yeah, I'm a barley guy.
We've had Joe Dumond on. He's a big time barley guy.
I've gotten some of Joe's books and I've followed some of his stuff. In fact, that's where he had a guy on for the patterns of the Bible, the Living Bible, or something of that nature. Was the chiastic?
I like Joe, and if he ever hears this, I personally like Joe. But when I differed with him, it was like I went and urinated in his cornflakes or something just for disagreeing with him. So
yeah, he is a little sensitive on that.
just a little bit. If you
here's another question. What about the constellations bringing in the month?
I have discussions with a girl out in California who's Jewish, and we've had this back and forth, and I really don't follow that at all. So I really can't speak to it. She follows it quite a bit, and we have had our disagreements over it. But personally, I don't think the stars is as big as the sun and the moon.
Because if you look I mean,
they're important.
Genesis 1:14, it says that the stars, moon, and all three are for the signs and the appointed times.
Right.
So some people want to exclude the constellations. I believe the gospel's written in the stars. I've never done a deep dive study like, was it Bullinger that did the book? And then there's
numbers. I got it.
Yeah, he did one on the stars too. And I got a Facebook friend or two that they really get into the Maserote, Doug, is that correct pronunciation?
Yeah, that's right.
And really look into it. But I'm sort of all three of the above, plus the barley and the storks. The swallows know their appointed times. So there's a lady over in Israel, Rivka. I forget what her what I think it's Rebecca, but Biderman. That she's got a ministry. She runs around the country and looks and inspects the barley and basically says, okay, it's now ready to be harvested. She's usually a month ahead of the majority of people, but she's got a good point that when it comes to setting that first month, if you actually wait longer, then practically all the barley is already falling off the grain and everything. So I don't do calendar wars, but I tend to agree with Joe and maybe Michael Rood and her and you, Mark, on when the first month should be observed. But we got a whacked out calendar for a reason, in my opinion. Have you ever done any research on the calendar changing at the time of Hezekiah?
No, not really. But I know there's lots of discussions on calendars throughout everybody, really, and that's why there's a lot of disagreement from that standpoint. I really don't want to get into discussions about calendars.
That's a mild understatement.
So, Mark, tell us what is the big takeaway from really deciphering the correct Jubilee year? Like, what impact is that going to have on us concerning the end times?
If I have the correct year, and it is correct the way it is saying, I'm saying that 2027 is the return of Jesus on the day of vengeance. Is the fulfillment of the day of vengeance of Isaiah 61, because Jesus declared that 80th Jubilee on 27 AD on the Day of Atonement.
So you're saying 2027 is the year?
Is the year? That's correct.
And
I had the tribulation started in 3/14/2021. I'm looking for the third seal right now.
Oh,
now what you're calling the tribulation is not the Great Tribulation, though, correct? The Great Tribulation,
this is the first half.
Okay, but we've all learned that, but actually nowhere in Scripture. I'm pretty pushed back on this one. I think that's something we all inherited from Ribera and Darby and Schofield, and it's just been rinse, wash, repeat like bad shampoo. There's nowhere that says there's a 7-year tribulation period. There's a great tribulation. Now, I believe there are birth pangs. The birth pangs and the seals aren't necessarily in that great tribulation. I believe the fourth seal is when we start actually experiencing great tribulation. But It's
I
just,
agree with you on the fourth seal for sure.
I think that is the trunk, if you would, of the seals. And I'm not dogmatic on this, but I believe that the manufactured little buggy bug and its so-called remedy were and are the first seal. And I wouldn't doubt it if something else gets released in the near future. So.
Well, it's kind of
Well,
like the
yeah.
horses are running, so you kind of hear the hoof prints. You hear one coming, then another one, you hear it coming, and then you hear the other one. So it's not a distinct time. It's kind of they build momentum over time.
Do you ever
And
listen
so,
to Howler's prophecy update each
oh
week?
yeah, all the time.
Yeah, that's where I get my news. And again, God bless him for spending his time and money reading through all the dribble. But even the mainstream media publications are starting to, I guess, get the memo or get the word out, or at least leaking it that, hey, next year's not looking good for food with all the nitrogen, with all the gas shortages to make nitrogen, and a lot of our food is GMO manufactured now and can't even grow
We
unless you
were
have
saying the same things back in 2000.
No, they weren't.
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Yes,
Did what? Again,
I was reading.
was it close to 2 days then?
Zero Hedge. I was reading Zero Hedge and all these guys and Alex Jones, and it was the end of the world pretty much back then. And
yeah, Doug, but you're once bitten, twice shy now.
Yeah,
so
but because there's a lot of nonsense that gets out there, man. And I tell you, if we Scott, listen, if we keep talking about the sky falling all the time, I mean,
you don't do you not listen to our friend in the updates and see what's going on in the world?
I know what's going on in the world. I read a lot.
Okay.
I used to do the same type of things. He does an excellent job. There's no question. But we just got to be careful, when we start saying that we're not going to have any food. I know, but I was seeing the same sky is falling. We had the wheat virus that was coming out back in 2008, 9, I don't know, 10, 11. Maybe it was 2011 when the wheat virus was coming out. That meant that there was going to be no wheat. I did presentations on this all the time. So that's my point, man, is that I had all the stuff. I did There Will Be Signs, and I was showing all these reasons why, man, it's going to be 2012, right? Because for a guy who doesn't believe in the pre-trib anymore, you keep beating that basic drum. So
no, I don't. Since I was a kid,
and I don't think it's 2027.
You do this. You don't even let me get an interjection in.
Please.
Had we been friends in 2008, and you were talking about the sky is falling, and we had been talking, I would have told you, dude, we're not even close to the second day yet. We've got at least another 22-ish years, give or take. I promise you, I would have told you that. In 2000, I would have said, dude, you've got another 30 years probably at least. And then I don't know, maybe it's just because the first rider holds something called a toxone, and he has a wreath, and you got the WHO with a wreath, and they were trying to implement in various countries where you again, this, Doug. I don't Mark, but by golly, if you can't see its precursor to what your books are about, they're setting it up. I mean, everything is unfolding. Now, again, if we're still chatting in 2030, my understanding is just incorrect. It just is.
My understanding falls apart in 2024.
Mark,
you're more committed, Mark.
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
This is all based on the 6,000 year theory being correct. And
what would you say about the two witnesses? Where do those fall in your understanding of all of this?
Okay, well, based on the end date of the Yom Kippur 2027, I back calculated 3.5 days plus the 1260, and I came up with Passover in 2024. So that just happened.
So answer the question though. Where do they fall in your scheme?
In the last half, under the Great Tribulation, almost.
Okay,
just before 6 months before.
they come 6 months, but it does say they're going to prophesy for 1,260 days, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's why I use the 1,260 plus the 3.5 days they lay in the street. Dead.
So they're going to, so I'm confused.
Okay. If you take my end date, which is
Yeah.
the Yom Kippur,
Okay.
and take 1,264 days from it, I just rounded up 3.5 to 1,264. All right. That back calculates to Passover, but the half day puts you in the morning and not, so they're still there on Passover. And it's just the way calculation came out from the chart of the final 7 years.
So when would they start?
You believe they testify in the final 3.5 years?
That's correct.
Okay. And when I say they, I mean we.
They have to because they're still there right before the seventh trumpet sounds, which is the last day, per 1 Corinthians 15:50, and also per the Battle of Jericho. I lean heavily on the Battle of Jericho also. If you look at my presentation, I have a comparison of the Battle of Jericho to Revelation, and keep scrolling through it, you'll find it. Keep going.
Keep going. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Back one. No, that's it. I don't know if you can see it from the screen. The other people can see it because it's kind of small. But each day is a seal, is how I have it break down. And the way the Battle of Jericho goes, it's kind of one march for 6 days. And on the seventh day, you got 7 marches. And then all of a sudden, you got the big destruction of Jericho. Well, that took what, hour or 2, 3 most? So it's pretty quick. So
would you equate that? I guess the trumpets would be them marching around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there's the resurrection / catching up of the elect, and then that's when the bowls are poured out over the next 10 days. Or do you believe it's actually just poured out all during Yom Kippurim?
I think it's all poured out on Yom Kippurim, and I think it's 1 hour for the judgment of. There's a verse in Revelation 18:11 or 18:18. I'm not sure. That says the judgment comes out in 1 hour.
Okay.
So I think it's quick. So it's kind of a progression of time, real quick. The way I see the Battle of Jericho, just as showing you the progression, and that's why I believe Revelation is over a week, is because of the Battle of Jericho. Cool. Nowhere in Revelation does it tell you that. Kind of looking at Revelation 12, kind of trying to figure out what's going on there. I'm still not totally with Tony on his interpretation of it.
Tony Robinson.
Yes.
Wait, you think the tribulation is how long?
I had the tribulation as, well, actually it's 2,371 days.
Oh, you said something about a week. Did I?
Well, the week of the Battle of Jericho.
Okay. And how does that correlate to?
Each day is a seal.
Each day
is a seal.
So like a 24-hour day, or?
No, it's a year. I equate each day of the week as a year.
Oh, I see.
What would happen on the 5th seal?
Yeah.
That's great. That's when you have great, the Antichrist is ruling and you have lots of Christians dying.
Yeah, that's a good interpretation, because there are a lot of people, souls crying out under the altar at the 5th seal, if I'm remembering correctly.
I have the 4th seal coming in the 4th
midpoint.
Year, so 3.5 is the midpoint. So it could be there. I don't know when it actually opens up.
My personal belief right now is it starts on a Passover when we see the abomination of desolation, and I think again, I'm not dogmatic on this. Mark and Doug knows this. I believe that the beast will mimic Yeshua and try to pull off a great delusion, and that's where Doug's understanding on this too, that the biggest lie will be we can become as gods, we can become more than human, if you will. So and that's the deception, that the whole world. I mean, well, you never die if you can become like me, and
Right.
if he's actually in the false prophets doing signs and wonders and miracles, and a man appears to die and then resurrects. I mean, yeah, I think it would fool all but the elect, if and when this happens, if it plays out the way we think it will. And again, I thought the interesting thing about this is, prior to me starting to do this with Doug, I don't know, about 2 years ago, it's easy to sit behind a keyboard and slap prophecy geeks like us around, and then you start doing it and you get challenged and tested, and and again, there's certain things I'm pretty firm about, like you saw me and Doug start going "Ow!" a second ago, but again, that's where we need to be able to do that and still be friends. So.
Well, one of the big things that kind of got to me, and when 2021 started, Bib 1 in particular, 3:14, was there wasn't a temple built. And I've always believed that there's a temple was going to be built first. That's what's taught throughout. I don't know how many people I've listened to that they all believe that the first thing is going to be is a temple and a 7-year agreement. Well, that didn't happen. So I went back and reread Matthew again, 24. And Jesus doesn't mention anything about a temple except one being destroyed. And that happened back in 70 AD. So the signs of the beginning of the tribulation are such that it's not there. The only thing that we have firm proof that we know we're in it is when the abomination of desolation is there. And I understand that happens during the Feast of Tabernacles on the 7th day. And I have it in 2024, which is less than 2 years away.
So do you believe the return then is in the spring, 3.5 years later?
No.
Okay.
That's the problem is that the Jubilee cuts the 49th year short. So you actually only have 2,371 days up to that point.
Does this factor into any of some of the stuff Joe Dumont, is 2,300 Days of Hell? I actually bought his book.
I've never read that book. I only have one that shows his timing of the Jubilees. And I spent way too much money for it. And it was worth this, in my opinion. Don't tell Joe I said that.
Well, that's okay. Joe would get his feelings hurt. But yeah, I think Sam, Hamp, Sam's going to come on with us and present the alternative view of this.
No.
And again, and he believes it's 49 years. He did some interesting math with me last night. It was about, if it is 49 years, which I don't believe it is, and you multiply it by 40,
like that too.
Yeah. You multiply it by 40, you get 1,960, which you add that 40 years to when the temple was destroyed, it adds up to 2,000. So we had a good little back and forth, just private conversation last night for about 45 minutes. I don't think either one of us convinced the other one was wrong. So
you won't.
You'd be surprised, man. From what I understood on the Bible and prophecy 5 years ago, I'm willing to shift in a heartbeat if I'm shown I'm incorrect.
I may be incorrect, and there are some things that kind of say, yeah, I'm maybe incorrect because I didn't see a temple and so forth for the 2,300 days.
Whoa.
And I believe it's actually 2,300 days, and I believe that started on May 23rd, 2021. Because there's 2,300 days from that point until the day before the Day of Atonement in 2027.
You ever watched our 5-person roundtable chat where it was myself, Doug, John Howler, Nelson Walters, and Sam Fulcher? All 5 actually agreed that a temple, a brick and mortar temple, we're not saying that it won't be built, but that it's not a prerequisite to be built, that the naos means the holy place, the location. Were you even watching this way? I think that was 2 years ago, Doug?
No, I wasn't watching you back then. I'm a new guy to this
It's
program.
probably on the archive channel, but yeah, that's where it's the naos, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a brick and mortar third temple. It
It
could
could be a
just
tent.
the altar, the location and the altar, because sacrifices were accepted. Obviously, that's where that Temple Mount years and years and years ago, before anything was there, that's where Abraham took Isaac. Before the temple was built, David, that's where they were doing sacrifices. So it's the location that's holy more so than it is the temple.
Yeah, it's not the structure, it's the place there. Man, well, Mark, you have given us a lot to think about. We will be on pins and needles to see if it happens by 2027. And if it
we'll
does,
know in 2024.
That's right. Well, there you go, by 2024. So that's not very far off. That's only a year, right? So we got about a year
and a half.
It's just under 2 years.
Okay.
So that means
it would from the past Feast of Tabernacles until you have one, and then you have the second one. So it's just under 2 years.
Okay.
So
we should see
Mark,
the Abomination of Desolation sometime in 2024. Is that right?
In the fall is what he's saying.
On the 7th day on the Feast of Tabernacles.
Okay.
Which I have is September 23rd.
So, okay. Well, that's pretty specific. So
And
if it doesn't happen by
guys,
then your theory is wrong. So we'll.
Right now, guys, real parting word for me. We're just supposed to be watching right now. And I think as long as we're being gracious with others that might even have different opinions, and we're not getting our panties interwad and taking our football and going home to play by ourselves, and that's what we should be doing. I mean, because ain't one of us got it all figured out. People. I read a comment; it kind of hurt my feeling that I'm arrogant. I'm confident in what I believe, but I also know that I ain't got it all figured out. So sorry that I offended you.
That's correct. There's also the belief that from the Septuagint that we're beyond the 6,000 years already. And this is based solely on the 6,000 year theory being correct.
Yeah.
So if that's not correct, then this theory is incorrect.
Same
I'll
thing.
get that right away. But it's based on the 6,000 year theory, and I have a little piece in there about 10 different authors that Tim Warner wrote in his book, 2 of who I knew beforehand, and a couple more. There's one other book called, The Gospel of Bartholomew, I think, has also reference to the 6,000 years in it.
The Epistle of Barnabas mentions it too. So.
Yeah, that's where I first learned of it, from him and Hippolytus in their writings.
Wow. Well, thank you. Jubilee Sabbath, where can people get more information about this? Do you have a website or something you can?
I just have a blog. It's
Okay.
8th Missing Jubilee under WordPress.
8th Missing Jubilee .wordpress. Is that right?
WordPress.com, and I think
WordPress.com.
8th Missing Jubilee or Pre-Wrath Rap.
Okay. And you guys can always just Google Mark Svoboda and the 8th Missing Jubilee.
Mm-hmm.
So very good. Well, thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here with us. We'll be back next week, unless, of course, something happens, end of the world kind of stuff. We'll find out. But assuming that, we're still here, we'll be doing the show. And I hope you'll come with us to Israel in April 2024. You can go to thewaycongregation.com for more information about that. You can also become a patron of this show. So go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp and give whatever you want to give. Thank you for that. And again, big shout out to the patrons already. Thank you. It's a huge help. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you guys on Shabbat. We're going to keep going through the book of 1 Samuel. Good night.